Hey, what's up, mortals? It is I, the Silent Sheepdog, here with a new video for you. Welcome back to part 9 of What If Deku Had the System. I just wanted to greet you guys by saying, sit back, relax, you're in for a treat. And so, we began. The city was lively, as it usually was. Civilians roamed the streets and heroes were patrolling. It was a peaceful day, at least out in the open. Down in the darkest of alleyways, things weren't nearly as pleasant. It was concealed, hidden from the heroes, so there the most twisted individuals could prowl. There, the villains were thriving. One of these villains was a crimson-clad maniac, wielding a jagged and rough sword. His entire being was soaked in blood, as if it was part of all his evil attire with numerous red stains. This was the villain that had had the heroes trembling with fear, the hero killer, Stain. To any ordinary person, maybe even some heroes, he looked menacing, but not to the entity that was watching him. Within the shadows themselves was another being, one that was made of darkness. This was a shadow soldier, doing exactly what it had been instructed to do. The soldier merely observed Stain, all while staying out of sight. It was to not intervene or engage in combat with the villain. That was its order. The soldier kept its eyes locked onto the unknowing villain, carefully analyzing all of his movements and actions. So far, he hasn't been too difficult to manage, only attacking the occasional hero or villain unfortunate enough to cross paths with him. It was such a waste to watch so many fall, but it couldn't be helped. The soldier was not there to fight, after all. "Stop right there, hero killer!" A voice then shouted, grabbing the attention of both the villain and the soldier. At the opening of the hallway, standing in the blinding light, was another unfortunate soul. This one seemed to be a hero, clad in an armor much similar to the soldier's own. The main difference being that the hero's armor was white, signifying that he had something that the soldier didn't. The villain stared at the hero, who was soon about to be his latest victim. Shadow continued observing without any change, for it was still following its orders. Meanwhile, the sports festival went on as it should. The matches continued smoothly, with some of them being more one-sided than the others. Izuku was absent for some of the matches, but it really didn't matter. He missed the match between Todoroki and Sero, which was immediately after his own, but he already knew that the ice user was far stronger than his opponent could ever hope to be. The few matches that the Greenette ended up seeing were towards the end, and he could feel his classmates watching him the entire time. He didn't know what they wanted, but he also didn't stop to think about it. His mind was occupied by the second round, and his coming match with Todoroki. The bi-colored teen had already made it clear that he was going to use Izuku as a means to rebel. The green-haired boy had gotten first place in all previous competitions by a large margin. Defeating him with nothing but ice would do wonders for Todoroki's ego. Izuku, however, had no intention of playing along with this little scheme. As much as he felt bad for Todoroki, he didn't care whether he used his flames or not. Under normal circumstances, he might have tried to help him, but those didn't apply now. Todoroki was doing this for the sake of a grudge. That alone annoyed Izuku. There was no real reason for him to hold back, especially when facing people that clearly are stronger. If that wasn't enough, the ice user tried to justify his actions through a false narrative when thinking that Izuku was just like him. All of this piled up into one answer. Izuku doesn't care. He doesn't care about what Todoroki says to try to feel better about himself. And he certainly doesn't care if he uses his flames. Holding back in battle is a death sentence, and the ice user will have to learn that the hard way. As this thought came to an end, so did the first round. The second round was about to begin, starting off with the match between Izuku and Todoroki. The green-haired boy got up from his seat and went to prepare himself. There actually wasn't much to prepare for, other than some mental preparation, of course. So he started walking to the ring almost immediately. It was on his way that he bumped into someone. From around the corner came a menacing figure, clad in flames, one that Izuku recognized. It was the number 2 hero, Endeavor. and he stopped as soon as he saw Izuku. "You're Midoriya, right?" the flame hero asked with a rather stern voice. Izuku maintained his composure, even in this man's presence, as he responded by saying, "Yeah? What about it?" with his usual calm voice. Endeavor didn't give any form of reaction to this. He just frowned before saying, "Your next match is against my son. Make him use his flames," with a more commanding voice. Izuku was caught off guard by this, but he didn't let it show. The hero wasn't asking him for a favor. He was making a demand. "My Shoto was made to surpass All Might, but he's being rebellious. He's neglecting his true power, abandoning the purpose that I gave to him. You might just be the strongest person he'll ever face. So teach him a lesson. Make him embrace his destiny," Endeavor then demanded, sounding more intimidating now. Izuku only got more furious upon hearing this. He didn't like the idea of Endeavor treating his own son like an object, and he hated how the hero tried to boss him around. But there was one thing that bothered him the most right now. He was being treated like a pawn. Both Todoroki and his father saw him as nothing but a stepping stone, a means to get what they wanted. Izuku was in the crossfire of a different war, and he wanted no part in it whatsoever. The green-haired boy was silent for a long while, not even breathing. Endeavor was confused by this, for Izuku's eyes were being covered by his bangs. "Are your hands tied?" he suddenly asked, sounding the same as he had before. Endeavor was caught off guard, and could only utter a shocked, "What?" Izuku now raised his eyes, looking straight at the flame hero. Endeavor could almost feel them narrowing onto him, as if they were drilling holes into him, as the boy repeated his question. "Are your hands tied?" This time, putting more emphasis into each individual word. Now Endeavor could process the question properly, and became rather confused as he answered by saying, No." Izuku was once again silent upon hearing this, as if he was processing, until he sighed heavily. He then walked towards Endeavor, stopping right next to him, and said, "Then why can't you settle your own grudges?" with a cold voice, before continuing to walk past him. Endeavor was not happy to hear this, and was almost ready to attack the teen, but he stopped himself. He hadn't calmed down. Far from it, actually. He was frightened. There was something in Izuku's voice that terrified him, with no real way to be described. It was uncanny, commanding, and ice-cold at the same time. It only lasted for a second, but for that second he forgot who he was talking to. For that 1 second, he thought that he was speaking to some kind of mythical king. Shortly after this encounter, Izuku was called to the arena, and it didn't take long for him to get there, and the same went for his opponent. Both contestants were being introduced as they stared each other down, but Izuku couldn't hear it. He could only think about Endeavor and Todoroki, and how they both intended to use him. The mere idea of this made Izuku angry, as he really didn't want any part of this so-called war. As the introductions finished, Izuku decided on what to do. That's when Midnight shouted, "Beget!" only to be interrupted by Izuku. "Wait! I forfeit the match!" the green-haired boy shouted, loud enough for everyone to hear. Everyone, including students, heroes, and teachers, fell silent upon hearing this. The festival was a means to earn recognition, something that would be useful to have, so forfeiting would waste the opportunity. It also didn't help that Izuku had the potential to win the entire festival, so what was he thinking? Todoroki tried to answer this question on his own, but that's when Izuku broke the silence by saying, "I don't want to be a part of your grudge, Todoroki. You tried to use me to stand up to your father, and he tried to convince me to make you use your flames. Since the two of you are so similar to one another, I'll tell you the same thing that I told him. Unless your hands are tied, you settle your own grudges. with the same voice before turning around and walking away. Todoroki didn't know how to react to this. Izuku was right. He did plan on using this fight to rebel against his father, but that wasn't going to happen now. He needed this battle. It wouldn't mean anything if he defeated anyone else. But there was something else that bothered Todoroki. Something that Izuku had said. He had said that he was similar to his father. The mere thought of this infuriated the bicolored teen, and he couldn't hold himself back anymore. He launched an ice attack towards the green-haired boy, who still had his back turned to him. Everyone reacted and tried to call out to Izuku, but the attack connected before they managed to do anything. Now the ring was filled with an icy mist, so thick that they couldn't see through it. Everyone panicked, thinking that Izuku had been hurt. As Midnight and Cementos moved onto the scene, they were about to apprehend Todoroki for what he did, until something moved in the fog. Before anyone could react, a block of ice flew out of the mist and hit Todoroki in the chest. They all turned their expressions toward the mist, only to be shocked by what they saw. It was Izuku, walking out without a single scratch on his body. They all watched the greenette slowly approach his attacker, as shards of ice floated around him. He looked at Todoroki, eyes narrowing as he did, as he said, "So that's how it is. Don't blame me for what happens next!" Quite angrily, before launching the ice, Todoroki defended himself by using more ice, but Izuku used all of it against him. Midnight watched all of this and tried to intervene, but she was stopped when Aizawa spoke to her through the speakers. "Don't try to intervene, Midnight. Todoroki threw the first blow. This is just self-defense." The hero was frozen in shock, but she understood. Todoroki attacked Izuku when he wasn't defending himself, so he should have expected some sort of retaliation. Todoroki was quickly overwhelmed. Every time he defended himself, he ended up giving Izuku more things to throw at him, which quickly made him unable to do anything. It didn't take long before he could feel the drawback of overusing his ice, as frostbite started to creep onto him. "What? Are you freezing? That's too bad. If only there was someone who could also use flames around here," Izuku then said, taunting Todoroki. The bicolored teen only got infuriated upon hearing this, as he launched one last attack. Izuku didn't budge, as he raised the ice high above. Todoroki looked up at the massive boulder, but before he could react, it fell towards him. A loud crash was heard, as more cold mist covered the field. Then, as it cleared, the results were revealed. Todoroki was defeated, lying unconscious in a pile of his own ice. Midnight didn't announce any form of ending, just as the audience didn't cheer. This wasn't a match. Izuku was just defending himself. The entire stadium was dead silent, with the wind being the only audible sound. As a breeze passed by the greenette, he turned his gaze toward the stands. In the audience, he could see the familiar figure of Endeavor, coated in flames as always. His mind right now was filled with things that he wanted to do to that hero, but he managed to restrain himself. He could already tell that the flaming giant had been frightened by something, and that was good enough for him. Izuku sighed heavily after seeing this, as he then left the ring without any interference. This video was sponsored by Honey. Honey is a free browser add-on available for Google, Opera, Firefox, Safari. If it's a browser, it has Honey. Honey automatically saves you money when you check out on sites like Amazon, Papa John's, and Kohl's. Wherever you shop, it's a good chance that Honey can save you money. All you have to do when you're checking out at these big sites is click that little orange button, and it'll scan the entire internet and find discount codes for you. It takes 2 clicks to install Honey, and now, anytime you check out, Honey will scan the entire internet and find coupon codes for you. If there's a coupon code, they'll find it. And if not, you can rest assured that you're getting the best price possible. If you install Honey right now, you can save so much money on your online shopping, doing nothing. There's no reason not to install Honey. It takes 2 clicks. 10 million people use it, 100,000 5-star reviews. Unless you hate money, you should install Honey. Use the link in the description to start saving money now. After the battle had ended, the other matches needed to be postponed for a short while. This was mostly so that the teachers would have enough time to clean up the mess that had been left behind, which also took much longer since Todoroki wasn't there to help them melt the ice. It was one of the most bizarre things to happen, and everyone was still shocked by it. Izuku Midoriya, the one with probably the most potential out of everyone, forfeited without a second thought. They still couldn't wrap their heads around it. Why would he ever do that? Uraraka, along with many of her classmates, sought to answer this question. They all left the stands, searching for the green-haired boy. They knew that he didn't need medical attention, since Todoroki was the only one that had gotten injured in any way, so it was only a matter of finding him. It took only a few minutes before they found him, walking through one of the halls. Uraraka was the first to see him as she called out, "Deku!" Izuku stopped upon hearing this, as he turned towards her and the others. He clearly looked surprised, as he asked, "Uraraka? Is something wrong?" While sounding a little confused. Uraraka kept observing Izuku, trying to find anything hidden in his body language, as she said, "Well, we saw what happened out there and wanted to see if you were okay," while sounding a little concerned. Izuku was just confused by this, for he didn't understand what his brown-haired classmate was after. That's when Ida spoke up to clarify. "What Uraraka is trying to say is we didn't expect you to forfeit that match. All things considered, so we came here to see if everything was all right, and maybe ask you why you decided to give up," the blue-haired boy said, using his usual tone. Now Izuku's confusion turned into a little surprise, because he didn't expect this. It quickly changed to a more serious voice, however, as he responded by saying, "I'm fine. You don't need to worry about me. And I forfeited because I overstayed my welcome. I know the whole point of participating in this is to be noticed by heroes, but I'm not sure if I want that attention just yet," with his usual calm voice. His classmates were a little surprised, but they bought it. Uraraka, however, noticed something odd about Izuku. His posture and body language were strange, as if there was something he didn't want them to know. She was going to ask about it, but she was interrupted when a loud voice shouted, "Deku!" from the other end of the hallway. Everyone turned their eyes to see that it was Bakugo, and he was not happy. The blonde looked bloodthirsty, with small explosions crackling in his palms. Izuku was unamused by this as always, as he asked, "What do you want, Bakugo?" with an equally unamused voice. Bakugo grunted upon hearing this as he responded by saying, "Ugh, what do I want? You know what I want. How dare you forfeit before facing me?" with more anger. Everyone looked a little weary, almost intimidated by the blonde. Izuku, however, was just as unmoved as before as he said, "I thought I told you already. You are no match for me. Our rivalry ended before it even got a chance to start." Bakugo didn't like this response, as he growled again before saying, "It's not over, Deku. It's not over until I defeat you," with the same angry tone. Izuku didn't react. He was as cold as ever. They all waited for him to respond, but he didn't. The green-haired boy just sighed, before turning around and walking away. Now everyone was once again shocked. Even Bakugo was. They had expected Izuku to give some cold response like he usually did, but he didn't. This time, he just pretended as if Bakugo didn't even exist. The blonde was now infuriated and couldn't hold himself back anymore. He charged at Izuku, using his explosions to propel himself forward, ready to attack. The others saw this and tried to warn the greenette, but they weren't fast enough. Bakugo was too fast, closing in on his target as he shouted, "I'll make you regret not following my advice from back then, Deku!" but was interrupted. No one had reacted to what had happened, for it was too fast. 1 second, Bakugo was about to attack Izuku, and in the other, he was pinned to the wall. It took them a while to realize that the one pinning Bakugo was Izuku, and he was holding him by the throat with a tight grip. The blonde started to struggle and make grotesque noises, implying that he couldn't breathe. What made things worse is that Izuku showed no sign of letting go. His grip just tightened, more and more. "Stop it, Midoriya!" Ida shouted, desperately trying to reach his green-haired friend. Izuku wasn't listening, as he tightened his grip even further. The students were now horrified, for they didn't know what to do now. Izuku wasn't listening, they couldn't stop physically, and didn't show any sign of letting go. Uraraka was especially horrified, for she could see what was in Izuku's eyes. His eyes shone an icy blue, radiating a cold, yet cruel and murderous aura. It wasn't until Bakugo's face started turning purple and his arms began to weaken that she snapped back to reality and shouted, "Stop it, Deku! You're killing him!" With a clear hint of panic in her voice. This, somehow, managed to reach the green-haired boy. His grip loosened until he felt Bakugo fall to the floor, as his eyes returned to their usual selves. The students all rushed to Bakugo's side, who was coughing violently. Izuku just stood there. He just stood there, staring at his own hand and his own shadow, before starting to tremble. Uraraka saw this, but she didn't get to say anything before Izuku took running off. The brunette didn't say anything as she chased after the boy, but she couldn't keep up. The greenette was much faster than her, but she didn't stop running. She didn't know what was going on with him, but it didn't look good. Something was bothering Izuku, and she felt the need to help him. Uraraka kept sprinting down the hall until she saw that a door was slightly opened. It was the only one that stood open in some way, so she imagined that this was where Izuku had went to hide. She walked in to see that it led to an almost pitch-black locker room. It didn't take long before she saw Izuku, sitting curled up in the corner with his knees pressed against his chest. This sight pained Uraraka, but she didn't say anything, as she walked up and sat next to the boy. Izuku could feel her presence, but he didn't show it. The two of them sat there in silence for a while, neither of them making a noise. That's when Uraraka decided to speak. "Are you okay?" she asked, trying to sound as friendly as possible. Izuku didn't give an immediate response. He was silent for a while, until he said, I don't know what to do. I feel lost. Empty, cold, lonely, and scared. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to act, and I'm afraid. I look to my shadow for any sort of comfort, but it's not there. He's not there." With a trembling and pained voice. Uraraka didn't expect this, but she understood some of this. Izuku was talking about Igris, and it made her realize that the Shadow Knight had been absent all this time. Izuku then shivered as if he was freezing, as he said, "I feel so vulnerable without him. I feel so weak," before bursting out into tears. Uraraka was even more pained now. She hadn't realized it before, but Izuku relies so much on Igris for support, but now he isn't there. The greenette has no one to confide in, no one that could help him. The brunette hugged her crying classmate, doing her best to comfort him, as she said, "You're not alone, Deku. We're all here for you," with a soft voice. Izuku didn't reject her embrace. He welcomed it. He seemed to calm down gradually. The two of them sat like that in silence for a long while, until the light suddenly flicked on. "I am here!" A proud and familiar voice then shouted. The teens looked to see that it was All Might standing in the doorway with his usual smile. The hero looked at the two teens only to immediately realize that he might have made a mistake of some kind. "Sorry, am I interrupting something here?" the blonde then asked, sounding a little awkward as he did. Izuku stood up and wiped his tears away before answering by saying, "No, it's fine. Do you need something?" with a much calmer voice. All Might cleared his throat a little before saying, "Yes, I was hoping to speak with you in private, young Midoriya," with his usual voice. Izuku was a little confused by this, but he imagined that it had something to do with the Shadow Soldiers. He then looked at Uraraka, who was still concerned, before giving her a nod. The brunette felt a little relief upon seeing this as she said, "I'll give you the room," before leaving. As soon as Uraraka had closed the door behind her, All Might deflated into his skinny form. That's when Izuku asked, "So, what was it that you wanted? Are you gonna try to give me one for all again? With his usual calm voice. All Might chuckled a little upon hearing this as he responded, No, I've already passed it on to a third year here in UA. His name's Mirio Togata, and he was recommended to me by my former sidekick, Sir Night-Eye. With his cheerful tone, Izuku was rather pleased to hear that this wasn't going to be a repetition of a previous conversation, but he did wonder what All Might wanted. That's when the hero spoke up. Actually, I'm here because of my injury. I didn't want to overwhelm you. That's why I waited until now, but I was wondering if you could use one of your potions to help me get rid of it, he said, sounding just as calm as he usually did. Izuku was a little caught off guard by this, but he should have seen it coming. He knew that All Might was injured. He had thought about doing this, so it really was just a matter of time until it happened. Sure, let's do it. Just know that I physically can't give this to you, Izuku then responded calmly as he pulled a potion from behind him. All Might was a little surprised by this, but he didn't say anything before they got started. Izuku fed the potion to the skeletal man, as awkward as it was, until he emptied 2 whole vials. This is when All Might started to feel more rejuvenated, as he buffed up and said, "Thank you, young man," but immediately coughed up a bucket's worth of blood. Izuku almost began to panic upon seeing this, for he didn't understand what was going on. It was as if the potions had the opposite effect on All Might. It wasn't until the system chimed in that he finally understood what was happening. Warning. Unit All Might has rejected all means of rejuvenation due to the debuff, Curse of Destruction. Izuku froze solid upon hearing this, for it reminded him of something. It reminded him of the ghost that had been bothering him for a while now. The Monarch of Destruction. All Might, I need you to be honest with me. Who the hell gave you that scar? Izuku asked, with a weird tone. All Might was confused by this, but that's when he realized that Izuku was frightened. Whatever he knew, it frightened him. Young Midoriya, I can't tell you that. Why do you need to know, and why are you scared? The blonde asked, sounding genuinely concerned. Izuku was trembling, but he knew what he needed to do. The only way for All Might to understand is to tell him about the system, and why that villain is so dangerous. So Izuku told All Might about his secret, but he still didn't tell him about the necromancy. The hero was shocked, especially after hearing about the Monarch of Destruction, so he decided to come clean too. He told Izuku about a villain named All for One. He had power to take and give quirks, and he was the one that injured him. Izuku did not calm down after hearing this. His power as the Shadow Monarch was terrifying enough. He didn't want to imagine what more this All for One could do. It actually scared him even more to know who his enemy was. Calm down, young Midoriya, All Might then said. Izuku was brought back to attention as the hero placed a hand on his shoulder before saying, I'm not saying that I want you to fight him. He's my mess to deal with. But you've been doing great so far. So keep going. Do what you think is necessary, and you'll be fine, with an assuring voice. This made Izuku calm down a little. It didn't remove the danger, but it helped to hear his idol say that he had been doing great. He was going to do what was necessary, and there was only one thing that he needed to do. All Might, I promise I'll find a way to heal you, the Greenette said, sounding determined. All Might didn't speak against it, for he knew that if anyone could pull it off, it was Izuku. Thank you all for sticking around, and I hope that you enjoyed. Before you leave, we would just like to let you know that We the Celestials has many other channels for your entertainment and viewing purposes. All the information you need is right below here in the description, so feel free to check out all the other incredible projects that our team creates. Secondly, on behalf of We the Celestials, I would like to thank everyone involved in the production of today's awesome content. Their details will be in the description below. That's all for today's video, so goodbye, and have a divine day.